Good evening and welcome. It is my great pleasure to welcome everyone to tonight's third episode in the series of I am Rhonda Haynes, and I serve as Executive Director of the National Association for Urban Debate Leagues. When criminal justice reform was announced as this year's high school debate topic, we knew we had to do something beyond competition. In developing the concept for I Resolve, we at NAUDL set out to engage youth in real conversation about criminal justice reform. During tonight's program, students representing the Denver Urban Debate League will explore the need for treatment options for those suffering with opioid addiction and exploit flaws associated with the logic behind the war on drugs. With I Resolve, debaters move beyond competition and into the realm of real-world solutions, taking on tough topics and engaging respected experts and professionals along the way. There won't be any small talk here tonight, folks. I would like to personally thank Massey & Gale as the exclusive presenting sponsor this year for I Resolve. The firm's commitment to debate, and NAUDL in particular, is both longstanding and astounding. We could not do our work without Massey & Gale's continued support, and for that, I am extremely grateful. Finally, I am excited to welcome to the virtual stage Jill Santella of JP Morgan Chase. Jill serves as Managing Director, Global Head of Litigation, Government Investigations, and Human Resources Legal. In her massive day job, Jill is obviously able to finesse sensitive issues with a balanced ear, firm stance, and very keen judgment. Known for her skills in recruiting talented lawyers, Jill may be in for a real treat tonight. Jill, I hope you will share a few remarks about the need for and the importance of debate now more than ever, as well as JP Morgan Chase's commitment to engaging deserving young people. We are so very honored to have you join us this evening, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Rhonda. I'm really pleased to be here, and it's so exciting to be part of this terrific event. I want to first say congratulations to all the debaters here tonight. It's just a tremendous accomplishment. You should be very proud of yourselves, and it's such an exciting evening for all of you. You really are the focus of tonight. I just wanted to talk for a few minutes about a personal story I have with my experiences at JP Morgan Chase and challenging myself to really focus on diversity, focus on equality in the legal profession. I know that a lot of you may end up in this profession, which has been truly a wonderful experience for me over the last 30 years. I've been at JP Morgan Chase for 23 years. I can't believe it's true, but it is. And I remember what it's like to start out as a young lawyer. And I remember the challenges I personally faced as a public school law student, someone who really didn't have those kinds of connections to the law. My parents weren't lawyers. I didn't have relatives who were lawyers. I lived in Chicago. I worked for a New York based bank. And I remember thinking that I didn't know how I would fit in. I didn't know how I was going to succeed. I didn't know if anyone would accept me and really allow me to be my authentic self at work. So I always struggled with that over the years, feeling a bit inferior, feeling like I had to prove myself time and time again. Over the years, I rose to the level of running the litigation and government investigations and HR legal team for this huge bank, this worldwide bank. I still can't believe it's true. And I've been doing that now for the last decade. But once I started doing that, I got too comfortable with sort of just going along with the way the legal profession defined equality and defined power. And I just sort of let that happen around me because now I sort of fit in and I didn't challenge it in the way that I should. A few years ago, I was challenged by a judge during a trial who asked both sides of the trial, how many diverse lawyers will be speaking at this trial? And it was like a month-long trial. And on our side, we had one woman lawyer and two men, and the other side had none, no women, no ethnically diverse lawyers. And the judge was a woman, and she said, that's really disappointing. And then she went to in-house lawyers and said, well, how many of the clients are women here today? And we had a lot. All of our clients were women that day. And the other side, again, didn't have any. And she said, I will, the woman on our team was a fairly young woman. And she said, I will give you all the time you need to speak. So please give her that opportunity. And it really resonated with me. And I thought to myself, wow, am I really doing enough? Am I really doing enough to make sure that the legal profession is responding to what is happening in the overall population, right? The change that's happening with our customers, reflecting our employees. Are we really seeing that reflected in the lawyers who are representing us? And the answer was truly no. I also connected with the federal judge, Judge Shinlin, who I've known for years, who had said in the 35 years she had been on the federal bench, she had not seen any changes in diverse representation. In fact, she thought that it was probably getting worse. So that got me thinking. And I went to our general counsel, Stacey Friedman, and I said, this is terrible. I'm not doing anything to leave a legacy for our next generation of lawyers and clients and customers and employees to really show that I tried to change this profession. And so we set out to do that. And we started a initiative called Leading with Diversity, where we challenged our law firms and our company, and we got other financial institutions to do the same, to have over 50% of our matters led by diverse lawyers. So we said to our law firms, partner with us. We will give you the statistics. We'll meet with you every quarter, tell you how we're doing. We'll host events where together, all the firms that work with us can come together and say, we are going to respond to this challenge and make this happen. And what has happened over the last 2 years worldwide is we have reached that goal. And the law firms have brought forward in our relationships diverse lawyers. We have said to them, you need to not only hire diverse lawyers, you need to train them, you need to retain them, you need to promote them, and you need to make sure that they are present in the relationship that we have with you. And you know what? It worked. There was a National Law Journal article that said that this would never work because clients aren't brave enough to affect this change. And I'm here to tell you that that's wrong. We were brave enough to affect this change. We are doing it. We are challenging ourselves every day. We're not getting complacent, and we're making sure that this is an initiative that becomes our BAU. This is how we are going to operate as a company. As clients, we're going to demand diversity. We're going to demand of our allies within the law firms to bring these relationships forward to us to make sure that we're growing and that we're retaining and developing talent, both in our own company and helping the law firms to make that happen as well. Throughout this initiative, we thought a lot about, is it a zero-sum game, right? Is it that when one person moves forward, others have to pull back and suffer? And what we said is no, success is something we can all rise up to have. And it's not that you miss out when someone else is being successful. We can all be successful together. And we had to really encourage our law firms that was true, that that's how we felt, that we weren't punishing the white men at these firms. What we said instead is, you have this power, you have this great platform. Help us to make this happen. Help us to make this happen, and we'll make your whole law firm more successful. And I'm telling you that being that direct and that clear with our partners, really putting our money where our mouth is and say to them, we will not hire you. We will not engage with you unless you make this happen with us, really was the first time some of these law firms have heard that. And so I will tell you that this isn't easy. It requires some bravery. I'm a mom, I'm a daughter, I'm a wife, I'm, like I said, a public school kid. And I said, you know what, enough's enough. I am going to use my power, my voice, my platform, the money I spend as a client to affect this change. And I would really encourage all of you to know that you harness that power within you, that you have the ability to come into a profession that may seem like they don't understand you, that may seem like they're not ready for you. And you know what? They might not be. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be there. That doesn't mean that you can't be successful. And that doesn't mean that you can't help move that profession forward, that you can't be a disruptor in that industry and say politely, I'm a Midwesterner, I can be very polite, but to say it's time for change. This isn't acceptable. Let's all work together to make that happen. And then put a little pressure on people, put a little pressure through your pocketbook, through, who you hire, through using the judges who are, were really pushing me to make this change, using everyone you can, harness all that power that you have behind you when you get into those powerful roles, because I know that all of you will, and use that to really not just accept the status quo, but to push change and do it in a way that's meaningful and lasting. So again, I'm really pleased to be here tonight. I'm so proud of all of you and how courageous you are to be part of this organization, because I know it takes a lot of courage and confidence to do what you're doing. So keep going and be strong, and congratulations. I wanted now to introduce Jessie Clark, who is the Executive Director of the Denver Urban Debate League. So I'll turn it over to Jessie to take you into tonight's event. Thank you again for having me here tonight.
Thank you so much, Jill. Thanks for those remarks, and also thank you to JP Morgan Chase for their commitment to our youth. I also want to thank again our presenting sponsor this evening, Massey and Gale, as well as our series sponsor, the Asia Corporation. On behalf of all of our students, we are so grateful for your support and this opportunity to be on the stage this evening. This year marks the 13th year of programming of Denver Urban Debate League in our community, working in collaboration with local school districts, the National Association for Urban Debate Leagues, and also the University of Denver Sturm College of Law. The league began with just 3 member schools and 1 school district competing in one format of competitive debate, and we've grown to serve 4 districts and offer multiple competitive debate formats as well as competitive speaking events. For nearly 10 years, nearly 100% of our students have graduated on time. These students have gone on to attend such universities as Yale, the University of Denver, and Northwestern Law School, to name just a few. And over half of DUDL students enroll in college, and that is a number that is outperforming our school district rates by 24 percentage points. But debate results in more than higher test scores and attendance rates. The DUDL is a speech and debate community where our students cultivate compassion by understanding different points of view. This community holds space for individuals to develop young voices who then advocate for informed solutions in the area of public policy. This has been more evident in 2020 than in ever before, as our students have been called to action, demanding long overdue reform in criminal justice, public education, and stating unequivocally that Black lives matter. Alumni like Denver School Board Director Tay Anderson and MLK Early College teacher Christina Damon have been leaders at rallies and protests across the city. A West High School debater, Kikai Edwards, recently addressed the Denver School Board to speak about segregation in our schools and school choice. Northfield students Jayla Hemphill and Ava Ward have developed the Academic Accountability Initiative, urging Denver Public Schools to hire and support more teachers of color. And MLK College debaters Kalea Yazar and Donnie Austin were part of the delegation of students who developed the No Justice, No Peace resolution recently passed by DPS to teach more Black history in our schools. We are excited tonight to highlight the work Denver debaters do during iResolve. This public debate series is a profound reminder that the future of our country is full of hope. I know that after the presidential debates, we might associate debate with conflict, disrespect, and unkind discourse. But we have some future leaders here tonight to show that debate is much better than what you see on TV. When undertaken with civility, compassion, and respect for divergent views, debate opens doors and minds to ideas and solutions that otherwise remain hidden. And now we are honored tonight to welcome an esteemed panel of community leaders to provide commentary on our debate. Larissa O'Leary is an accomplished DUDL debater from Mapleton Public Schools and a first-generation college student who graduated from Coe College. She is currently a Truman Williston Jones and Horatio Alger Scholar in her first year at CU Boulder Law School. Cody Walliser has been part of the debate community in Denver for over 10 years. He is a fifth-year PhD candidate in communication studies at the University of Denver, where he is also the director of debate. He utilizes rhetorical and decolonial lenses to analyze the interaction between social movements, policymaking institutions, and new media technologies. Representative Leslie Herod. Representative Leslie Herod was elected in 2016 and re-elected in 2018 and again in 2020, congratulations, as the first LGBTQ African American in the Colorado General Assembly. Since then, she has passed 68 bills addressing criminal justice reform, mental health addiction, youth homelessness, and civil rights protections, including the ballot initiative Caring for Denver that raises $35 million annually for mental health and substance abuse treatment. Professor Sarah Hildebrand is the clinical teaching fellow in the Criminal Defense Clinic at the University of Denver Sturm College of Law. Before she joined the CDC, Sarah represented juvenile and adult clients charged with criminal offenses for over 6 years as a Colorado State public defender. Judge Susan Fish competed for all 4 years of high school and extemporaneous speaking. She graduated from DU Law School in 1987 and went straight to the public defender's office. From 2008 to 2019, she was a judge on the county court bench in Jefferson County and was the presiding judge for part of that time. David Shapiro is the executive vice president and general counsel of Vail Resorts. David is actively involved with several community organizations, including serving as a member of the board of directors of the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce and the board of trustees for Colorado Academy. Now, before we begin the debate tonight, I also want to say a big thank you to our coaches of the debaters who will be speaking, and congratulations to these coaches as well. And Gephardt from Rangeview High School, Daniel Walter from Rest Early College and DCIS, and Malaya Mahan of Northfield High School. And now, to introduce our debaters, please welcome our alternate for the I Resolve debate event. She has been debating for 5 years in the DUDL, representing the Denver Center for International Studies. She has a 4.2 GPA, is passionate about social and climate justice, and she plans to major in theater in college. Please welcome Iman Moadeli.
Hi. Thank you, Jessica. Good evening, friends, supporters, and participants of the DUDL. My name is Iman Moadeli, a DUDL student from the Denver Center for International Studies. The Denver Urban Debate League offers programs that break barriers for urban students by enriching educational and personal outcomes for students of color and low-income students. I have participated in the DUDL for 5 years, and I love it because it inspires me to continue fighting for social justice. Tonight, I am very excited to welcome 2 of my fellow DUDL students that will be participating in tonight's debate. Firstly, on the affirmative, please welcome Alex Hogru from Northfield High School in Denver Public Schools. We're super excited to have him.
Thanks, Iman.
Yeah, and next on the negative, please welcome Blessed Asari from Rangeview High School in Aurora Public Schools. Blessed is one half of the team that has won the last 2 DUDL competitions.
Hello.
Good luck to you both.
Thank you.
I'll begin this debate. My name is Alex Hogru. I'm a junior at Northfield High School. Thank you to the Denver Urban Debate League for this opportunity and for all the panelists for participating in this discourse. As well, thank you to all the people who made this debate possible, including my partners, Blessed and Iman. The opioid epidemic has hit the US hard. For some history, in the 1990s, many doctors were afraid of prescribing opioids. They feared that they would turn their patients into addicts, and so even cancer patients were opioids. However, a push in the late 90s and early 2000s by pharmaceutical companies like Purdue, one of the largest opioid producers, changed doctors' perception of them, along with the release of new opioids like OxyContin. This caused the first wave of the opioid epidemic, with many patients becoming addicted to the painkillers. The second wave came when those patients turned to heroin, which was much cheaper and easier to get, around 2010. The third wave came in 2013 and is still happening today with the rise of synthetic opioids like fentanyl. In all, the three waves have caused over 450,000 overdose deaths in the US. Of the almost 68,000 people who died from overdoses in 2018, 2/3 of them were from opioids. Our current system has failed people struggling with opioid addiction and their families and friends. The government has failed to stop the flow of heroin into the US and crack down on pharmaceutical companies, and commercial rehab facilities have repeatedly lied and failed customers. The best option now is to create a government-run rehab program that provides free rehab and therapy for addicts instead of sending them to prison and perpetuating the cycle. As well, we should expand Good Samaritan laws to prevent overdose deaths and help people into rehab. Government crackdowns on heroin and other drugs have been relatively ineffective, and it has proven very difficult to limit the supply of prescription painkillers. Purdue Pharma, one of the biggest players in the opioid epidemic, has paid out billions of dollars in settlements, but that pales in comparison to their profits. Purdue Pharma has made an estimated $35 billion since 2001, and the Sackler families, the owners of Purdue Pharma, themselves have made $13 billion. However, they were recently fined, just a couple weeks ago, almost $8 billion, most of which will go to help stop the spread of the opioid epidemic. A great way to use this money would be government-run rehabilitation programs. According to several conservative estimates, every dollar invested in addiction treatment programs yields a return of between $4 and $7 in reduced drug-related crime, criminal justice costs, and theft. While savings related to healthcare are included, total savings can exceed costs by a ratio of 12-1. Major savings to the individual and to society also stem from fewer interpersonal conflicts, greater workplace productivity, and fewer drug-related accidents, including overdoses and deaths. This money, along with the decriminalization of opioids, can help stop the spread by helping people into rehabilitation and keeping them out of prison or from having an overdose. The CDC has said, quote, inmates with opioid use disorders particularly pose a challenge. During their time in prison, many untreated inmates will experience a reduced tolerance to opioids because they have stopped using drugs while incarcerated. Upon release, many will return to levels of use similar to what they used before incarceration, not realizing their bodies can no longer tolerate the same doses, increasing their risk of overdose and death. One study found that 14.8% of all former prisoner deaths from 1999 to 2009 were related to opioids, end quote. This means that sending people to prison who have opioid addictions can be extremely harmful to their health. As well, current rehab is failing patients. It has been known for many years that their treatment gap is massive. That is, among people who need treatment for a substance use disorder, few receive it. In 2011, 21.6 million people aged 12 or older needed treatment for an illicit drug or alcohol use problem, but only 2.3 received treatment at a specialty substance abuse facility. We have to get these people out of prison, take them away from the corporations and the pharmaceutical and rehab industries that prey on them, and instead use the power that we have to create government rehab facilities. This would help reduce the amount of people in prison, as well as helping stimulate the economy and create more jobs. Thank you.
Okay. All right. How will addicts afford treatment?
This program will be paid for and run by the federal government.
Okay. And how will the federal government pay for this?
Fines on pharmaceutical companies are quite large and could help pay for a lot of this. Like I said in my speech, there was an $8 billion fine levied against Purdue Pharma, and other pharmaceutical companies have also been fined large sums of money. The rest would be taxpayer money.
Okay. How can we then ensure that rehab is effective and stop relapse?
Rehab has been shown by the CDC in separate studies to be effective against drug patients. Any treatment at all is better than what patients are receiving now, which is nothing, and prison. Relapse is an inevitable part of recovery from drug addiction, but using scientists and educated professionals, which the government has access to, we can maximize the effectiveness of government funding and increase patient care.
Okay, so federal, state, which is better? Because when you look at state, wouldn't it, be tailored to specific needs of those struggling with opioids than federal level?
Well, the federal government has more funding and would have a better organized effort, right? States tend to have wildly different policies on these type of issues. Two examples of that are marijuana and abortion laws in different states. So it's better for one concentrated effort by the federal government, which would make things less complicated and make sure the addicts can get the best care that they can.
Okay, and then what is the scale of your plan?
My plan would ensure that as many people as possible get treatment for opioid addiction. It would be a federal program using billions of dollars so we could treat a lot of people. And fines that have been levied against pharmaceutical companies, as well as pieces from the federal budget, make sure that this program will be fully funded and able to influence the greatest amount of change.
Okay, thank you. Give the crack to the kid, who the hell cares? One less hungry mouth on welfare. First ship them dope and let them deal the brothers. Give them guns, step back and watch them kill each other. The penitentiary's packed and it's filled with blacks, but some things will never change. Tupac changes. Hi panelists, my name is Blessed Asari, and I'm so fortunate to be part of this opportunity. Today, I intend the urgency to reform the war on drugs and propose an initiative similar to Portugal's with 3 main reasons. While Alex has identified the harms of opioids, he doesn't go far enough into explaining opioids in relation to therapeutic rehab and its effectiveness to stop drug abuse. We need to change our perspective on the entire war on drugs due to the fact that it hasn't done anything to help the ongoing issue of drug abuse, and that is decriminalizing all drugs. It all started in 1971, where President Nixon went on to broadcast out drug abuse was public enemy number 1. Drug control agencies' strict measures and mandatory prison sentences were supposedly set up for drug crimes. Then we see in 1973, where he created the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, a specialized force committed to targeting illegal drug activity in the United States. This led to $2.03 billion just for war on drugs. In 1980, President Reagan started a campaign where he passed penalties for drug crimes and increased a large percent of incarceration for crimes. Then Clinton, who passed the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994, which convicted and mandated life sentences for criminals charged with a felony, which included drug crimes. Many have suffered from these sentences, but not as much as communities of color, who have been the very victims of these tactics, where fathers, sons, brothers, mothers, sisters, most importantly, families, have been pinned into a lifetime of misery. The number of people behind bars grew 350% from 1990 to 2014. The number of arrests has been the highest for African Americans, almost 3 times that of white demographics. This strategy has especially crippled African Americans, from the very words of Nixon's counsel and assistant to domestic affairs, which he professed. We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate with the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, vilify them night after night on evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. These were the very words of Nixon's counsel. This isn't just a drug issue, it's a racist initiative that needs to end. We need to understand that criminalizing drugs only creates a stigma to communities of color, making decisions that affect the wrong people. My question to you, counsel, is why should we continue to criminalize drugs knowing well the agenda is totally biased and unjust? Why should we be funding into such a racist agenda? Let's take Portugal, for example. In 2001, Portugal faced an urgent drug abuse problem. In order to find a solution, they made the wildest choice by becoming the first country to decriminalize all drugs. By doing so, total drug use decreased by 18%, and the percent of people in prison decreased substantially. Not only did it help solve the issue of drugs till today, but it helped the economy by reducing many in the prison systems, while offering measures to safely use drugs and prevent such diseases associated with drug abuse. Another example is in our very own state, Colorado. Just from legalizing recreational use of marijuana, money has gone into massive job creation, decreasing youth consumption of marijuana and school construction. Nationally, it costs taxpayers $38.8 billion just to keep inmates in prisons. What if we use that money into rehabilitation and job creation, which is far more beneficial? Imprisoning does nothing to get inmates jobs. It only cripples them. The money could be used into decreasing many inmates and supplying them a life and job in America. These drugs will be administered properly to whoever wants it in a safe dosage, while preventing themselves and risking family, loved ones, and the American people. Council, you decide what is best and reasonable in this course of action. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Blessed. Can you clarify what Portugal's drug policy is to its citizens?
Definitely. Portugal has created a policy in which people caught with under a 10-day supply of any given drug will not be prosecuted. This prevents addicts from being wrongly convicted and makes sure that distributors or dealers are not able to continue spreading the addiction.
What effects has Portugal's drug policy had on drug use and incarceration?
Like said in my speech, it has dramatically reduced the amount of drug addiction by 18%, as well as the amount of people incarcerated for drug crimes. That went from 44% to 24%, which is very dramatic. As I said in my speech again, it also removes a lot of stigma in the African American communities and from drug use and addiction, and allows more people to search for treatment.
Does your plan create rehab facilities of any sort? Can you just clarify that?
Of course. No, it doesn't, but it allows for nonprofit organizations to have a more impact in communities that need rehabilitation and, most importantly, education on drug usage. And as I said in my example with Portugal, nonprofit rehab has made a huge effect on their society.
How is the war on drugs related to your policy? Because you mentioned it in the speech.
Of course. So we see that the whole war on drugs wasn't really created to decrease drugs. It was actually, influence. It was actually pushed on the African American community unjustly. And with that, like, all that drugs went on the communities and they were criminalized for something that was totally unfair and very biased and very racial.
How is your plan related to the measure that passed in Oregon last week?
Yeah, that's very good. So like my plan, it's very similar to Oregon. Like I said, Oregon decreased, I guess they also passed that same plan with decriminalizing drugs, but in small dosages. So that is what my plan also initiates, which is one process that could help my plan go into effect.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much, Alex and Blessed. That was really inspiring. It was awesome to hear the cases that you've worked so hard on. I don't know if our audience knows that we've been working on these cases for about a month and a half, so it has been a pleasure to work with them. And it's now my honor to introduce the next portion of our program, which will include some questions from our esteemed panel. So I am going to turn the time over to them to ask some questions of our student debaters, and we'll start with Judge Susan Fish.
Thank you, Sarah. Alex, you did a very persuasive job in persuading us that treatment is needed. And from your statistics, about 19 million people have not engaged in meaningful treatment. You've persuaded us that big pharma is has a great amount of money that could be invested into treatment. And I agree with you that tapping into that, especially the fines that were levied within the last couple of weeks, would be great. But I'd like you to address Blessed's really accurate description of the history of the war on drugs, because it's clear that the government has put forth very racist policies that resulted in mass incarcerations in the 90s, in the early 20s, and even now, of minority, disenfranchised, and marginalized populations. They don't trust the government. They are not going to walk into government-run facilities because they just don't trust the government. So based on that, how would you get people to engage in treatment?
Well, first of all, obviously the engagement of people of color in government and specifically in this rehab program is key. As well, I don't know if I mentioned this in my speech, but the opioid epidemic overwhelmingly affects white citizens for a variety of reasons, one of which is that many communities of color do not have the same access to health insurance that white Americans do. And so they were not given access to painkillers and did not have the same opportunities for addiction that white communities did. As well, there is some bias in the medical profession that people of color do not feel pain in the same way that that white people do. And so that a combination of those two factors resulted in many more white people being affected by this than people of color. So while it is important to address people of color in this, a majority of addiction and a majority of where the treatment would be needed are Midwestern, mostly white rural towns.
Thank you, Alex. I'm now going to pass on to Cody for a question of Blessed.
Hey, Blessed. A really powerful speech. My question to you is really simple because your policy describes a desire to decriminalize or even to potentially legalize all drugs. Everyone watching right now would probably assume that some drugs are more dangerous than others and that maybe they would want to decriminalize only certain ones. So why is it appropriate, Blessed, to decriminalize all drugs in this very broad, general way?
That's a really great question. I understand that, decriminalizing, it's like a wild, choice, like, whoa, like this is crazy. But if you put it into a broader perspective, and if you look at the social issues, no matter what, if you decide to decriminalize or if you decide to criminalize any drugs, it's still going to have an effect. And because the severity is on, communities of color, it's important that we just take it all out and we just say, you know what, just decriminalize all of them, because we're not just doing it for, we're doing it for the betterment of us, but like looking at the whole society right now, we see that African Americans, like I said in my speech, have been penalized to this, and families matter in these circumstances. And decriminalizing drugs will be the appropriate action to, help the social issues that are going on with drugs. And also we can investigate those impacts that will occur if things go out of hand. But as I said, in Portugal too, they decided to decriminalize all drugs and it didn't really have an effect. But if this plan would be or is put into action, then we would kind of see the impacts it has, if that's okay. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Blessed. I'll pass it to Sarah to ask Alex a question.
Thanks, Cody. Alex, as you mentioned, the communities of color are often folks with less socioeconomic resources. And so while you said that communities of color aren't as impacted by the opiate epidemic, in 2017, among non-Hispanic Blacks, the opioid-related overdose death rate was 12.9 deaths per 100,000 people. So demonstrating that that community is also affected by the opioid crisis. So what will you do, or how will your plan address that issue within communities of color? And also how will you make sure that those folks have access to low cost or no cost treatment?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. As I mentioned in my speech, integrating people of color into this program is key. As well, like you talked about, people of color are often affected by policies that target low-income people much more. So white addicts oftentimes have much more access to commercial treatment, which is the main way that people receive treatment now. So this kind of federally funded program would have much more of an effect on people of color than it would on white people. As well, treatment centers would be, it's generally African-American people do not live in rural places as much as white people do. So it'd be much easier to get them treatment and to have treatment centers there. And so that African-Americans would receive the levels of treatment that they would receive from this would be much more than they are receiving now, more so than white addicts, because of the socioeconomic difference.
Thanks, Alex. I'll pass it to Larissa.
Hi, thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Blessed, for your very powerful speech. I'm wondering kind of how rehabilitation centers will function, because in your it will open it up to nonprofits, but as someone who's incarcerated for drug addiction, I think I have this concern that not having adamant rehabilitation centers present will create further substance abuse. So do you explain that?
Of course. I'm sorry, can you rephrase your question? You kind of cut it out.
Yes. Yes, of course. How do rehabilitation centers function in your affirmative in terms of decriminalization? Where do rehabilitation centers fit in?
Oh, of course. So as I said in my speech, I think the thing that we need to apply is experts in the field of drugs, experts in the field of what kind of drugs are being administered and how it affects the human body and how that whole functions works. So if we, apply these experts and if we have people who are involved with this, I think it will really help, the rehabilitation as well as the very key, which is education. If we bring like a sort of awareness and education into like rehabilitation, I think that will really have an impact into these nonprofit organizations and rehabilitations that we're trying to implement with this plan.
Of course, thank you. And I'll go ahead and switch over to Representative Harrod.
Hello. Thank you so much for that. Alex, my question is for you. You talk about the almost intentional efforts of the pharmaceutical companies to ensure that people were dependent on their product, right? And then we talk about the rehabilitation centers that are federally run and mandated. What are we going to do that those centers are not also ripe for abuse? Because in those centers, there are also medically prescribed treatment programs, right? How are we going to ensure that there's not abuse and that we're not just creating another institutionalized place for people who don't want to deal with them in the community?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The biggest difference here, at least in my mind, is that one is for profit and one is nonprofit. So the government facilities, right, obviously have no incentive to keep people addicted. And if anything, they have an incentive to treat people, right? It would obviously cost them less money. Whereas the pharmaceutical industry had an active incentive to make sure that their patients were addicted to these opioids because it made them money. Like I said, Purdue Pharma made $35 billion off of the opioid crisis. And so the biggest difference here is that the government is not incentivized to keep people addicted. They are incentivized to treat people, which is hopefully what happens.
Okay, thank you. I'll pass over to David.
Thank you.
Thank you, Blessed. Thank you for your wonderful, very passionate and well-substantiated argument. I have a question for you. So it's two parts related. First is, would you agree that there's often some connection or nexus between drugs and violence? And if you agree with that, if you're decriminalizing the drugs aspect and drug use aspect of it, how do you address what's often a related violent act and violence around the use?
Of course. So obviously, I do absolutely agree, especially when you go into like drug dealers or like, low income communities, and you often see drug dealers. It's like black on black crimes, and that has been in effect through what is killing, Black members of our society, like our sons, our fathers, our like daughters, and our just whole community. And I feel like one way that we could, I guess, push through with decriminalizing drugs and dealing with violence is having an approach or figuring out a way to have, the drugs being safely administered in a way that, not only are you going to consume it, but the fact is that how are we going to see how communities are going to react violently wise, and how can we kind of settle the peace? Because I feel like the whole issue on drugs and race, it's a deep, deep, deep issue that has to do with so many different aspects, including violence. And so just figuring out a way to kind of combine these difficult aspects and to, focus on, okay, how can we help this society? How can, like I said, educate more? And how could we really prevent violent things from happening if we decriminalize drugs?
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much to both of our debaters and all of our panelists. Blessed and Alex are actually going to leave the stage now. They're going to prepare their final speeches. While they do that, we are going to get some question and answer time with our panelists, get to know them a little bit better, get to know what inspired them to spend this Tuesday night with us talking about speech and debate. And so I'm so excited to have Professor Hildebrand and Representative Herod join me on the stage now. I'll start with you, Sarah, since you're on the stage with me, but the same question for both of you. How do you think the cases that Alex and Blessed have researched and presented here tonight would play out in your line of work, in the State House, in the Academy? How do you see them being responded to and accepted?
Yeah, I think maybe if it's okay, I'll respond to the question from the point of view of a defender. That's what I did for a long time, and I'm currently teaching students to be defenders. So both of the points that they made and the speeches they gave were really passionate, and the points that they made were really important. I think we need both to really solve the systemic issues that are at play in our criminal system. Over the years, have seen so many folks implicated in the criminal system over and over and over for issues just related to drug use and addiction issues. And so to have folks have available opportunities for effective and low cost or no cost treatment would be invaluable. And also, of course, people who are incarcerated have less opportunities to sort of get their feet underneath them and rebuild their lives, right? So both of the solutions Alex and Blessed presented, I think would be really helpful, invaluable for our society, right? So many people would be able to contribute meaningfully if those solutions were implemented. So I'm really curious to hear what Representative Herod has to say on this question.
So am I. Representative Herod, the question is to you.
And I'm so sorry, my dog is deciding to have a bark attack. So excuse me if that. So, honestly, Sarah, first of all, is a rock star. Thank you for all the work that you're doing, Sarah, in the system. I come at this from an interesting perspective. My sister is in the system. She's been in and out of the system for about years. We just found out that she is back incarcerated. She started out back when the war on drugs was raging in Oakland, California. We grew up very differently. She's older than me. I'm not allowed to say how much older anymore. We grew up differently, different fathers, different households. But what was interesting with her is that I didn't know until I was actually elected that she suffered sexual trauma when she was 16 years old. And that started her dependency on drugs. At the time, it was crank. And no one asked her. No one offered her treatment. She went into the cycle. She went 3 strikes you're out. She went 0 tolerance, whatever policy they could to keep her in the system. And she continued to go in and out on drug charges, continue the cycle of incarceration, poverty, right? Mental health, lack of mental health care, and substance use. She continues that cycle today. And so we do need more access to resources, right? But we can't just do one thing without the other. We have deinstitutionalized in this country, which has not helped to just kind of leave people out on their own. But community-based services could have helped her if she had them, or if someone just asked what was going on and then give her a sentence that was actually accurate, right? Which likely would have been access to care. My nieces and nephews find themselves in the same cycle, right? So it's intergenerational trauma. And, when folks talk about the cost, that's why I serve on both the Judiciary Committee and the Finance Committee, because the cost of the state is great. And it's not just limited to what we see. It's not just limited to the cost of prison versus of care. It also includes trauma, right? And the cost to the community that we also have to think about. So a lot of my work is based on my direct experience from my sister and as a family of someone who is incarcerated. And I very much appreciate the conversation today because I think it really does encapsulate so much of the conversation now, but everything we're talking about, both sides of the argument, is light years ahead of where we were when my sister was first incarcerated. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for sharing both of your perspective. Representative Herod and Ms. Hilbrand, we'll see you both in just a minute. I'm going to have you leave the stage now. We're joined by two of our other panelists right now with a little bit of a different perspective. Cody Welzer and Larissa both have recent debate experience. And I'm curious, of our panelists with the most recent debate experience, how has debate impacted your professional and academic endeavors? How has it helped you succeed in the fields that you've chosen? And Cody, I'll start with you.
Sure, yeah. I was really reflecting on this question, and I think for me, the first thing to say is that debate saved my life. I mean, it took me from a place where I didn't really have, the same type of purpose or drive that I do now. It also just took me off of a different life path and put me onto a place where it seemed reasonable to have a career where I had some power and where I was influencing other people in a positive way. So that's the first thing. But the second thing really is that for me, debate is all about having tough conversations and learning from those conversations. And that can apply to any professional setting. So that's how it's helped me in my professional life, is that my job is all about having tough conversations. And if I wasn't able to learn and grow from having those conversations, I wouldn't be any good at my job. And I just hope that I am good at my job at the end of the day. So that's my answer, Sarah. Thanks so much.
I appreciate that answer a lot. As a kid who saw debate fundamentally change her life growing up in a coal mining community in Utah, I completely appreciate everything that you just said. Larissa, I will pass the same question to you.
Well, I would first like to echo everything Cody said, because I never knew that I would love debate as much as I do. I was a little freshman. I think on an everyday level, debate makes, learning how to makes my law school reading so much easier, because I feel like I am the master of skimming. On a very foundational level, my sophomore year, we debated economic engagement with Cuba, Venezuela, or Mexico. And when everyone else was doing the Cuban embargo, me and my partner were running this Women in Juarez app, and we were discussing how women were violence in Juarez and the criminal justice system was doing nothing, which we see now here in the US and across the country. The women are facing interpersonal violence. And when I was running my case, I was witnessing the parallels between the women in my affirmative and the women in my family who had experienced this interpersonal violence, and a system them. And so when running this, I realized I need to get my legal degree, I need to get my higher education, because having that law school degree is the only way that I can pursue justice for them that isn't just incarceration. And I think that's really where the intersectionality lies for me, because I had an incarcerated parent, and I see how often the justice system is, we're just going to lock them up, but that doesn't do anything for victims. There's no sense of justice there. And so really for me, debate helps me open my eyes to all the isms of the world, all these things. So that's how it's helped me.
That is so inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, snaps all day. That's incredible. Cody and Larissa, I appreciate you joining us. You can leave the stage for a little bit until the feedback portion. We are now joined by David Shapiro and Judge Susan Fish. And I have a slightly different question for both of you, but for the two of you, I'm wondering, based on what you've seen tonight in your experience, how do you think the types of skills our debaters have demonstrated would translate to the private sector or the courtroom? And David, I'll start with you.
Great. Well, I think they immediately translate to the business world, both in the legal world, of course, and non-legal. So in my role at Vail Resorts, I get to work with a lot of lawyers as a general counsel, but also a lot of non-lawyers. And I always emphasize to my team, the most important skill is actually your communication skill and being an effective communicator. And so while you have to be able to know the tax law and be a good accountant and be good marketing, whatever the subject matter is, you have to know the subject expertise. At the same time, if you are not an effective communicator, you can't actually get your message out, of course. And so I'll give a quick example. Someone had mentioned sustainability earlier, and one of the areas I oversee is our sustainability program. And we're competing for the same dollars that marketing and everyone else is competing for. And so what we have to be able to do is to communicate to the entire executive team as to what the initiative is help help our programs and help our environmental programs, and we have to sell it. And so in order to do things like that, yeah, you have to have the exact skills you have today to create an argument and then sell the argument. So I look forward to seeing where the two young students today can take it.
I do as well. Judge Fish, the same question to you.
Let me start by saying I would be honored to have Alex, Blessed, Larissa, and Cody in my courtroom any day. They're better than so many lawyers that I've seen for a long time. So I just wanted to say that first. I became a lawyer partly because of Perry Mason. And for those of you who are really young, Perry Mason won every one of his cases, I think, and won them by crushing witnesses on the stand in the courtroom. That didn't work out so well for me. So my number one reason for becoming a public defender was to be a voice, as Larissa was talking about, to be a voice for people who don't have a voice in the criminal justice system and have the machinery of the system against them. I became a judge to try to work within the system to make it better. And the things that I got from being in speech and debate for 4 years helped me, as David said, immensely. These debaters, as you could see tonight, have critical thinking skills. They focus on facts. They focus on detail. They pay attention to detail. They know their case. They know their case so well that they were able to take questions from these panelists and answer them. We didn't see that from, two of the top leaders in our country, and I didn't see that from lawyers who appeared in front of me. So they're getting that now in high school. And Larissa, let me tell you, you are going to be ready to walk into a courtroom and represent the people that you want to represent. You are learning how to stand on your feet. You are learning presence, how to be calm, how to have passion like Blessed and Alex, but how to do it calmly to get your point across. You have listening skills, you have organizational skills, and you have confidence. And to have these skills at your age is amazing. When Cody said that debate saved his life, my heart stopped. Because if this program can do that for you and then give you the skills that you can help others, there's nothing better. And it will.
So inspiring. And I felt the same way. I just really relate to all of that. Mr. Shapiro, Ms. Fish, I appreciate both of you joining us. I'm going to ask you to leave at the moment. We're going to be joined now again by our two debaters who have been busy prepping their final summaries to present to us. And so I'm going to ask Alex and Blessed to both join the stage one more time. I am going to leave you for the final time tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. We will finish up with the final statements from Blessed and Alex, some feedback from our panelists, and a last word from the Denver Urban Debate League. Alex, you are
up. The opioid epidemic is ripping through America. We need a response from our government and large, decisive action in order to help addicts. Blessed's plan does not do enough to prevent the rampant use of opioids in the U.S. and is not quick enough to respond. Rehab and therapy is the most effective at a government level, and as nonprofits and other efforts have not provided to enough people and leave a massive amount of people without treatment. The decriminalization of use of opioids will get people out of prison and help them get back on their feet. Racial tensions and discrimination can be dealt with in other ways, which is what Blessed brought up. While systemic racism is a problem in America, it does not have an effect on this epidemic. A large majority of people affected by opioids are white, rural Americans. In response to Blessed's claims, Portugal and the US are wildly different countries. Portugal's drug use problem is across all classes and is not race-related. A generally homogeneous country, and so they don't have the same issues with drugs that we do here in the US. The US, by contrast, has a huge racial history around drugs, and a vast majority of drug use is concentrated in lower class Americans. There's no guarantee that the implementation of a policy like this would be effective or have the same results that Blessed claims it will. Since so many Americans are not getting treatment for addiction, any treatment at all would be effective. The CDC has repeatedly found that addiction treatment can have massive effects, especially over longer periods of time. As it is now, many addiction facilities are incredibly expensive and not as effective as they could be, which is a major problem. A majority of opioid users are poorer, rural Americans. They do not have access to any treatment, much less one that might yield real results. The government has the funding and authority to use experts and doctors to build an effective rehab program for the millions of Americans that struggle with opioid addiction. This could save tens of thousands of lives every year, and any effort to do that is paramount. Like I said in my responses to the panelists, incorporating people of color into this program would be key to making sure that this program stays ethical and has the most effect on communities of color struggling with opioid addiction. This program would help many people who do not have the economic resources to get treatment, many of which are people of color. As well, as Representative Herod brought up, keeping corruption out of this program is paramount. This would be much easier than stopping the pharmaceutical companies from perpetuating addiction in their clients because of the way these programs are incentivized. Keeping checks and balances and accountability in this program is key to making sure that it is effective. We need to create a new effort by the government to respond to the opioid crisis. We need to build rehab facilities that treat all Americans. As I have demonstrated, this is the most effective way to help people who are addicted to opioids and will save many, many lives. Thank you.
Panelists, I would love to emphasize how important you should take this plan into action. Like my plan emphasizes, reforming war on drugs and enacting Portugal's case is the only way to revolutionize two things that have negatively impacted our society, and that has to deal with race and drugs. It's important to understand that decriminalizing drugs is the only solution that will help us all. It's like a reverse effect of something that actually works. We must come to realize that the handling of drugs have been negatively impacting these communities in a bad way, and it's our responsibility to take action. Portugal enacted this plan and has helped many people get out of those consequences and have saved lives while providing drugs, including opioids, in a safe way and battling diseases like HIV and etc. Many have been unjustly held up by the prison system due to war on drugs. Alex's plan doesn't answer these problems effectively, especially addressing the injustice towards communities of color. We need to understand that these families who have been affected by the war on drugs aren't just statistics or numbers, but these are real lives. These are real people. They deserve to build their lives and escape the systemic abuse that our nation causes. They don't deserve to be penalized for the rest of their lives. They are human beings too, and need to be recognized with respect and decency. A recent example is Oregon, who decided to decriminalize all drugs in small amounts, and other states have joined this process too of decriminalization. So this plan is already going into effect and can be very influential and could also reap good benefits. We must come together as a community to help build each other and help shield each other against any racial injustice that is rooted into our community today, and actually see a bright future in our future. Thank you so much.
All right, well, I guess I am first. So first of all, you both were amazing, unbelievably good. And I want to congratulate you to be this good at your experience level in high school. The prep, the execution was just wonderful. So a few specific comments for both of you. First, for Alex, two things I want to call out on the substance. One is your transition of facts on the money, on the fines, to the funding, to the efficacy of the program, to the economy. It just brought us right along. And I just thought that was a wonderful use of driving that monetary point. Second, on your answering the question that involved the relapse issue, I thought you did a wonderful job of acknowledging a little bit of weakness on the relapse point and conceding that, but not overly conceding it, and then a quick pivot to a strong point right afterwards. And I thought you just handled that very well. Blessed, your use of signposts is so good. You did it again in the closing with, I have two things. And you say what those two things are. And in your introduction, your affirmative argument, I have three things, and you nailed it. And it lets the listener really follow the argument. And you do an amazing job with marshaling the facts. What I really want to say, amazing job, Blessed, of like just bam. When you come on and you come out firing, you have this amazing presence. And that is such a tool and is so important in marshaling the facts. Last point for both of you, your pace. Both of you are a little bit too fast on the pace, and you should really think about how can I use a pause very effectively. And you both have different styles, but you're both driving so hard, and learning how to vary that pace and tone will make you guys just unbelievable. So congratulations. Thank you for allowing me to participate.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. So y'all are awesome. And I hope you one day join me or join someone in the General Assembly leading the state, because you all put forward really strong arguments. And I think they both were super solid and very convincing for what we have to do, which is usually first reading, second reading debate, and then third reading, closing debate. You guys were really, really great. Alex, I will say that your pace was a little fast. So slow it down a little bit. Like, I know people want to get the most information into the time period, but that's not actually the most effective strategy. So in the General Assembly, we actually give people to testify and then more time for Q&A. But if you talk too fast, you're going to lose people and they're not going to catch anything. So narrow it down to the most important parts, and then know that you can back up with Q&A, which is exactly what you did when Blessed asked you those very tough questions. You very, very, very well. So I thought that was really great. The one thing I would say is try to stay away from generalized assumptions about what people look like in rural areas. So it kept hitting me that, you know, he thinks Black people don't live in rural areas. And my family has a hog farm in Mississippi. You know, remember that most Black folks actually come from slave and farming and rural areas. So just keep that in mind. Because I think it can be a little bit disconnecting depending on who your audience is. And I know that that was not your intent. So keep that in mind. But overall, your knowledge of the facts, we would probably come to you as like the Wikipedia guy who can tell you exact fact to back up the argument that you want to make, right? That's solid, super appreciated, and you are killer on the Q&A. Blessed, amazing, took me aback. I really love the way the coach this debate, which is obviously different than how debaters usually approach things. You are coming from it, I believe, as a very strong Black woman, and I love that, who does not shy away from bringing her culture to the conversation, right? So hello, Tupac, loving all of that. So keep that up. The one thing I would say is try to mix the strong hard with the soft smile, right? And like the hard and the soft and the fast and the loud and the quiet and those kind of things. So that really does give people pause, right? So for me, when I'm giving big speech, I pause more than I realize. Someone else actually had to tell me that. But that's how I kind of modulate my speeches, right? And give myself time to back up, slow down, think, connect, you know? Yourself and connect, which is very hard in this virtual world. But love how you approach the conversation. So y'all both were amazing. I would definitely have you guys testify in front of my committees. In fact, I hope that you do, because I definitely believe if you're on my side, you will convince my colleagues to join me. So thank you all so much. I'm super impressed. And now to Larissa.
Thank you. You guys did amazing. As recent person that's done debate, I definitely like had the flash of like, oh my God, she's running a critical affirmative. I haven't heard an opening like that in so long. It brought a smile to my face. I thought you had a very powerful performance, Blessed. Thinking as a debater, like often what kept coming back to my mind was like how replicate what they're doing in Portugal, just because the US is so different. So more so on like a substantive level, I think if you had more points like they did this and like this is easily applicable over here, I'd be like, yeah, like this makes sense. This is completely true. And I think more so really arguing at a root issue, which you were like dancing around, but I wish you would have said like, this is the only solution that will fix the root issue. Whereas some people could argue that like Alex's affirmative is only like a band-aid on how racism has impacted our country and communities of color. But I loved your opening. You guys aren't too fast for me, but I'm really fast as well. So maybe we're the same plane.
You're probably used to that, yeah.
Yeah, I'm used to it, right? And then Alex, your efficiency was really great. Like David had said earlier, your building your case was very plausible. It was very logical. Like, we're going to take this funds, apply it to here. And I was like, yeah, like shaking my head the entire time. I see how this works. I think maybe you need to be more adamant how you're going to ensure fairness in rehab facilities. And I think that's a question you had gotten, was how are you going to make people of color go to a government run place when they don't trust the government, because of incarceration and like just the distrust of law enforcement and whatever. But I think you're really good. Maybe you need to slow down a little bit, but that's very like different people. But you guys did a great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Congratulations, both of you. You both did a great job. I would love to have you be defenders in our clinic, and hope that you choose to channel that energy and passion into some good work. It sounds like both of you are headed down the right path. So I'll first give feedback to Alex. I'll repeat what some other panelists said. Just slow down. And I think that primacy and recency is a concept that we teach our students, right? People remember the first thing they hear and the last thing they hear. So you want to pick out your most important points and make sure that those come first and last. And I think that's more important than trying to pack so much into the time. But really, really great job generally. I thought it logically flowed really well and was extremely persuasive. Particularly, I liked how the detail that you included, that for every $1 invested in treatment programs yields between $4 and $7 of reduced drug-related crime, theft, and criminal justice costs. I made a note of that, and I thought that quantifying that impact was really persuasive and kind of gives the listener something to grasp onto and a real reason to kind of invest in your idea. I thought that you were pretty dismissive of the role that race plays in the opiate epidemic, and so I just caution against that. I think similar to what Representative Harrod was saying. You said that folks of color don't live in rural areas, and she gave an example of that not being the case. But I think just generally, right, the war on drugs affects communities of color disproportionately across the board, right, including opiate use. So, but just overall, Alex, really, really great job. I'm so impressed with all the work you've clearly put into this. And Blessed, I thought your intro with Tupac as a metaphor for your thesis was such a great hook. That was awesome. I was just engaged right away, and it provided the sort of dramatic effect that is obviously needed to get your audience really hooked in. But again, I would say pay attention to your pace and use volume and inflection as persuasive tools, pausing as a persuasive tool. You do that strategically, you can really improve the effectiveness of your narrative. I was hoping for a little bit more detail in your argument, specifically, really pay attention when you give specifics, right? So factor detail and specific cases would be great. But really, really great job, Blessed. I'm so impressed, and congratulations to both of you. So I'll pass to Cody.
Hey, thanks, y'all. I want to echo everyone in congratulating you, but I also want to put everyone on notice. I think I have a little bit of an advantage in terms of recruiting you, because before you go work for them, you might want to go to college. So if that's the case, come debate for me at DU. We can get something fun done together. And then they can all fight over you after that's over. My piece of feedback is actually for both of you, and it's fairly general, because I think the pieces of feedback that you've gotten have exhausted a lot of the specific material in this debate. It picks up right where Professor Hildebrand and Representative Harrod are talking about communities of color. And for me as a debate coach, one thing that I'm trying to teach my students at all times is that specific when we're talking about people, especially people who, we aren't, which is pretty much always the case in debate, because we can't be every single identity group all at the same time, right? So that when we're talking about people, or really other people especially, we can work to be more specific than, for example, communities of color, because that term is not as descriptive as saying that, certain populations, particular populations, right, are different from other ones. So often people paint with a broad brush with these really convenient terms. And I would just push you to be more specific in terms of what communities of color are you talking about? Because if we're talking about Native American populations on reservations, or we're talking about inner city, urban Black youth, for example, that's different, right? Those conversations, those communities probably could not be more different. And then we're also going to have differences between communities that even resemble those two descriptors. So we have differences between people in Native American reservations, right? There's over 2,000 nations of Native Americans in this country. We can't possibly be descriptive of them just with broad brushes. The same thing goes for inner city Black youth. People in Philadelphia look a lot different than people in Chicago because of the dynamics of those cities, the historical dynamics, the current dynamics of those cities, the policies, right, the governorships, the state legislatures, just like we were talking about earlier with Representative Harrod here. So being as specific as possible is best when we can do it. Now, obviously, you can't do that all the time. You have to use some convenient terms to make arguments that are broad. But the more storytelling and the more specifics that you can give us, I think it's for the better. Besides that, y'all did an excellent job, and I really did appreciate the specific analysis y'all brought. I'm going to pass it to Judge Fish, who I believe is going to be the last panelist to question you, or to give you feedback. Excuse me.
Thank you, Cody. Blessed and Alex, you're welcome in my courtroom any day. You have it on a lot of the lawyers who are appearing in courts in Colorado by a long shot. And let me tell you why. First of all, you knew your case. You knew the facts of your case. And you were passionate about your case. Passion and facts, that's persuasion. Second, you actually answered the questions that you got. And I can't tell you how many times I've asked lawyers questions and they've gone down like what they want to say and not addressed what the court wanted them to say. You guys were best when you were extemporaneous in answering questions. And that's because you knew your case and you knew the facts of your case. Alex, you slowed down when you were answering questions, and Blessed, you did the same, because you were thinking and you were trying to give the panelists the answer that helped your case the best. You did an excellent job here, Alex. A little tip in slowing down. First of all, I'll tell you, you guys were both nervous. And when you're nervous, you talk really fast. To slow down, you can take what David told you was a strength, and that was that you had like chapters. You had number 1, number 2, number 3. When you end number 1, you take a pause. And that's a transition to number 2, which is a transition to number 3. So that's something I did when I was in the courtroom. I was able to move. You guys aren't able to move in the virtual world. But that's a way to slow down. Blessed, like everybody said, your opening was a grabber. And I spent many years as the training director for the public defender's office. And if I could get young lawyers to do what you did in that grabber, I would have been so happy, because you grab people and they want to listen to you, right? And the only thing I would say is come back to that at the end, because it's what grabbed them, and what Professor Hildebrand said, primacy and recency. You want to start with something and end with something, because they might not remember everything that came in the middle. And then finally, I want to just finally talk about what Cody mentioned and what Representative Herod mentioned. Language in debate or any kind of speech is really, really important. And Cody talked about people of color, and Representative Herod talked about, Black people not living in rural areas. Language matters. And I know that you guys did not come up with the topic, with the wording of the topic, but immediately when I read it, I was struck by the last word, and that is government-run rehabilitation center for addicts. You guys need to talk to whoever wrote this, because we don't really use the word addict anymore. I'm involved in a lot of harm reduction and criminal justice reform right now. We don't use the word addict. We use PWUD, people who use drugs. And that's because it's inclusive and it's not derogatory or labeling. So I know that was not your fault, but if you can make some change in the debate topic, that'd be awesome. Great job. Thank you.
I guess I'm gonna go. Hi, my name is Roberto Carrata. I'm a co-chair of the Denver Urban Debate League. 2008. We are so proud of Blessed and Alex for their performance tonight, and of course for their continued involvement in debate, as well as Iman and all of our debaters, including Larissa Alire, who's one of our alums. And by the way, I just want to say, sort of inside debate joke, thank you both for slowing down so much, even though you had a lot of commentary about how fast you're going. And I know you struggled to go as slowly as you did, and I know I appreciated that. I wanted to say that when I was debating in high school in 1976 and 1977, the topic was criminal justice reform. And the case that won nationals that year, the National High School Debate Tournament, was a decriminalization of drugs case. Just so you know, it's about time policymakers started paying attention to debaters. All right, already? Just saying. This is what we're about. We're about debate teaches critical thinking skills and instills confidence. Debaters believe in data, they believe in science, and they believe in the important scrutiny of an independent media. These are things debaters believe in. Students debate topics involving policy issues important to our nation and the world. We are producing the advocates of both today and tomorrow. Of course, we can't do this without the support of the community, which among other things means financial support. And with that, I'll turn it over to my co-chair, Hank Provo.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Roberto. And I just want to, again, tell you how wonderful it was to have Blessed and Alex with us tonight. They are why I continue to volunteer with the Denver Urban Debate League, because it's all about them and it's all about their success. So thank you very much to the two of you, and equally to all of our wonderful panelists. I'll tell you, I learned a lot tonight as well, listening to our panelists and all the amazing insights that you provided to Blessed and Alex, you provided to all of us. And I will also tell you that I am the money guy, and that no opportunity goes by for us to ask our wonderful supporters and sponsors and community members to think about giving at some point to the Denver Urban Debate League, especially during these times of challenge for all of us. We will be having a formal fundraising event in December, right before Colorado Gives Day. So watch your social media and your email. But of course, there's never any time like the present to think about a donation, small or large. And if you do want to do something tonight to support Blessed and Alex and to thank them for their wonderful work, you can go to denverdebate.org, or you can email Jessie at jessicaclark@urbandebate.org. But otherwise, thank you so much for your time and efforts this evening. I had fun. I know you all did, and we'll see you soon.